Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's session. Right, so today we'll be continuing from where we stopped last week. We talked about design systems, we looked over the theoretical aspect, and we tried to practice some things on Figma. We created color styles, we created our buttons, created our typography styles, we created our spacing styles, our shadows, our grids, and our input fields, right? So we talked about how when you're creating design systems, so they are universal. You're creating things that are universal that you can use repeatedly in your design. You're creating components, right? So for colors, for typography, for spacing, for things like shadows, we usually create them as styles, right? Because styles are reusable. When you come to your Figma interface, right, at the very first, um, like at default, your default Figma interface, you're going to see styles at your right hand side. You're going to see if you click on your plus sign, you're going to see you have text styles, your color styles, your effect styles, that's the shadows, the background blur and all that. And you're going to have your layout guide, that's our grid system. So when you're creating your design system for your typography, your color, your shadow, and your grid, they're usually created as styles, right? But when it comes to creating the design system for your buttons, your input fields, your shadow, your spacing system, your checkbox, your radio box, your radio button, your drop down, they're created as components, right? So just these are two different concepts that I want us to hold on, like to get quickly. So we have styles and we have components. And it's in components that you see things like variants and instances, the mother component, the parent component, the child component, right? We have the ability to detach a component from its mother, so we can change it. We talked about the different states, different component properties, and all that, right? So in our last week class, we stopped at checkboxes. So we're just going to quickly create a checkbox and a radio button component with its different states and properties. Then we'll try to actually make a design out of this, like this design system we've created, or this framework, right? Because this was just created in the spur of the moment. But with this framework we have created now, we're just going to try to design something with it, right? Then we'll see where we go. So for checkboxes, we are familiar with how a checkbox look like. It's simply a a rectangle, right? So just let me just draw a a rectangle. It's usually a square rather. So I'm going to just make it in 30, 30. Right, so it's a perfect square. It's usually as a stroke. I'm going to make this 2 pixels. I'm going to remove the fill, and I'm going to round the corners a little, let's say 4. Okay, yeah. So this is usually looks like that. Then with a text. This is usually called the label. Okay, so I'm going to change the font. It's at Oswald. I'm going to just make it open sans, or just to make this more interactive. I'm going to use a typography system from the style we created before. So we created our heading, we created our display. This is also really large. So I'm going to make heading small. Right, I'm going to write this. So once again, like I've always said, once two things are grouped together, you should group it with auto layout, right? It's the way we group in Figma is the way UI designers group in Figma, right? Is the smart way of grouping. I'm going to click on both. I'm going to click on both of them with click on Shift A to group both of them, basically adding a frame to it. So just these two different atoms, right, to create a component called the checkbox. So just simply how a component comprises of, unlike the button we try to dissect the text itself, that made up the molecule called a button. Let's continue. Okay, so this is a checkbox, and like I've said before, the anatomy of a checkbox, it has the box itself and the label, which is perhaps just labeling what the checkbox is implying. So when you check the box, what are you checking? That's what basically what the label says. So you're going to have a box and a label in a checkbox usually. So now that is just the default state, right? But for checkboxes, you're going to have the check state, right? So the state when you have checked the box, and you're going to have a disabled state. You're also going to have probably an error state, right? So if you have seen, let's say you're trying to fill a form and you click on the submit button and you have not checked something, right? So sometimes those checkboxes, the color changes, the red color changes, and there's an error message below it, right? So sometimes you can still include an error message atom under here, right? So we're going to have 4 different states. We're going to have the default stage, the checked state, the default plus additional message, and the checked plus additional message. Don't know if that makes sense, but let's try. Let me just do that. Right, so there are different ways we can do this, like I've said before. You can either create your different states, then make it a component set, or we can just start by making this as it is itself a component. Right, so I can come here and I make this create component, right? So the color will change to purple, meaning that this is a component. So I'm going to add a variant. Right, so once I add a variant, I'm going to call this the check. Check state or click state rather. So we're going to create that, you just need your icon. So remember, your icon system should help you. So let's get an icon for check, right? So we have an icon, a small icon system here. So this is a check, right? So I'm going to copy it, Control C. Going to go back here to Control V. Pasted it in here. I'm going to remove the grid system so it's not disrupting me. It's currently at 24, 20, width of 24 and a height of 24. Right, so I'm going to, now if you're going to see something that's going to happen, now once I put this in here, it's going to respect the shift, the auto layout I have already constrained the previous molecule to, right? Because I put an auto layout in this system. And by virtue of the auto layout, there's a spacing of 15 pixels. Let me change it to 16 because we're respecting an 8-point system. So there's a spacing of 16 in here. Right, so your checkbox by default, once it's entering into this group, is going to respect that and just go take a space of 16 pixel from the nearest element you put it beside, right? But we do not want that. Not want that. So like I've said, you can decide to ignore this auto layout. There's a setting to ignore auto layout. Just going to click on your position. you're going to see an icon here that says ignore auto layout. Once I click on ignore auto layout, this icon now can exist on its own while still remaining in that auto layout, right? So I want it somewhere here, right? So I want it somewhere here, right? So this is, in simple terms, uncheck and check, right? So it can be as simple as this. Your check can look into, it can look and have different looks, right? So let me create another one. Right, sometimes even if you do not want a stroke, your check could have a field. So I'm going to remove the stroke. A stroke. So instead of using a stroke like before, we can simply, there are different ways to make checkboxes. We can do something like something more modern. I'm going to make this purple, right? I'm going to make I'm going to remove this background. So there's a little background here. I'm going to remove the background. I'm going to put the checkbox in inside. So it's currently at the back, right? But I want it to be in front of it. So I'm going to like the arrow shortcut I gave us before. So control bracket, right? To move forward. I need to change the color to white. Right? So this is what I want it to look like. Then for both of them, I'm going to click on Shift A to group it, right? All right, so now for this, we can simply bring this in, right? So we're just going to click on this, sorry, then Control Shift R, that's Control C rather, to copy it. So I'm going to come here, then click on Control Shift R to paste, like to paste over it, to copy and replace rather, Control Shift R, right? I'm going to delete this. And so now we have our label state. So this one, let's work with this. So this simply means that if we prototype this simply by connecting this to this, it means that once I click on this checkbox, right, this is how it's going to check. The checkbox is going to turn purple, and we're going to see our check icon in the middle, right? So like I did before, let me just get some text here. I'm going to write default. I'm going to write check. Yeah. So now also in the properties panel, if I click on the properties of this um component, I'm going to see property here. I'm going to change this to state so it's clear. So it has different states. It has the default and the check, right? So for the default and the check, right, you can also have different states for each. You can have default but disabled. You can have checked but disabled. And so you see things like to copy this here. Right, I'm going to gray it out to show that it means disabled. It's going to look like this. I can also copy this. I'm also going to gray it out. So I'm also going to come here to the and name it to disabled checked. Okay. All right. Before we do that, right. Okay. So we have property state where you have default and check. Right. You can also add disabled. Right. Just a. I click on this one. This one is default. Disable. Just different ways you can. This can also be checked. So we can also create one for error messages, right? So you can also add a small text beneath it, right? Small text that says error, something just occurred. So usually your this text with these error messages that are usually beneath your main checkboxes or your input fields, they are usually really small. So I'm going to disconnect it from this. I'm going to detach it from the current style so I can edit it. So I'm going to make this 10 pixels. So it's going to be very small, something like 10 or 12. 12 can also work, right? You can just have it here. And to usually be in red also, right? So yeah, so just something like this. So for your radio buttons, almost very similar, but instead of checkboxes, we have a radio button, right? Just a circular. Let me just do it. We're going to have a stroke. I'm going to make this 2 pixels. I'm going to make the 40. I'm going to remove the fill. And so this is usually the default state. So in the selected state, you're just going to have a smaller circle in the middle. So I'm just going to duplicate this. Control D to duplicate. I'm going to add a fill to that one. I'm going to remove the stroke and I'm going to reduce the size to, let's say, 20. So yeah, so this can be your checkbox and really button design system for a particular design, right? So probably your brand primary color is purple. That's why we are using purple here instead of the common green colors that you usually see, green or black that we usually see in checkboxes and radio buttons. Right. Now that we're done creating a just a small, we are done working over the different essential elements in your design system. So there are more. There's a drop down. There's other components of your design system. There's also iconography, which we have talked about. So it's as simple as going to the design system resources we have talked about. Go to Figma community and find an icon pack that suits your needs, right? Because as much as we can, this checkbox that we just got here, I can actually draw it, right? I can get a pen tool and I simply draw this. Right, then I just round it. Right, so okay. Yeah, round. Right, okay. So this is a simple checkbox that we just created with our pencil. So as much as you as a designer, you can design your icons, but we have a lot more to do, right? So we just take from the resources of people that have done this before us and have made it available to us, right? So go to your Figma community. I also dropped a document in the Discord channel where we have access to different sites, different plugins also that we can get icons, right? So these are all the things that you would need or that are essential for your design system. You can make more research and find more things and still take a look at that, right? So let's just create a simple something that we're going to utilize all this that we have created. So you have an input field, you have a checkbox, you have a button, right? You have your colors and your grid, right? So let me create a frame. Click on F or a section rather, Control S, Shift S rather. I'm going to get a phone frame, iPhone 13 mini. That's actually the one I like. Right? The width is 375 and the height is 12. So we have created a grid system. We're going to simply go to our effect, click on styles, to go to our layout guide rather. So I'm going to click on mobile grid, the grid that we just created, right? So this is the grid we created. If we look into here, we're going to see the settings. It's currently having 5 columns, a margin of 16, and a gutter of 4. Like I've said before, our margin is the distance from here to here. So to show, okay, so I get our spacing system, and I copy the 8 pixels, 16 pixels rather. Right. So now the red box represents our margin, right? So this here and this here, just to reiterate, right? So this represents our margin. For mobile, we usually use 16 or 24. If you're using iPhone 13 mini, right, it's best to use 16. If you're using a larger frame size, you can use 24, but we do not go past that, right? Because that's the margin, just simply the space between our content and the border and the frame. So our gutter now is now the space between the columns, right? So this gutter is helpful when we are trying to place elements on this screen. So let's say I want to put two boxes on this screen, and I get a rectangle, and I just draw one here. I draw one. I draw one. And I draw another here, right? So by virtue of the spacing, from what we can see here, we're expecting the gutter. We already know that this has a spacing of 24 pixels, right? So it is actually too big. We can still adjust it. We're just going to go to our layout guide that we created previously. We're going to adjust the settings and make our gutter 16. I think 16 works better since we are working with a mobile screen, right? So our content will be more compact because we're working with a smaller screen size. If you're creating for desktop applications, we can work with 24 and 32 pixels as your gutter. Right, so that's all should know about. So I'm just going to delete all this, right? Then I can just toggle my grid off. Right, so a simple design that utilizes everything we've just talked about would be a login screen, right? Because if you know you're trying to or a sign up screen, you're trying to an account. Yeah, so you usually have an input field where you fill in your details. You have your check boxes where you probably agree to their terms and conditions. You have your buttons, right? So if you have actually done the task that was assigned to you on the LMS, you would be familiar with how that works. Right, so we'll just try to create something simple with what we have created, right? So when it's 6 p.m., we work on something more complex. So getting our text, again, I'm going to just click on text. So currently it's set to heading small. I'm going to write create an account. Right, so this is why it's usually good to have different widths for in your typography. So different thickness, you have to account for different ones. So you have heading small, there's heading medium, there's heading large, right? So sometimes I might want this is create an account, but I want it to be thicker. So I want a bolder font size, a bolder font that I write. So instead of me having to detach myself from this style and getting a bolder font, I can simply look into the design system and find the one that meets my need. Right? So sometimes, so in your heading small, you're going to have the bold, you're going to have the semi-bold, you're going to have the black, that's the thickest one. Right? So it's going to work with this since it's what we have created. Or we can simply experiment. We're going to go to our design system to show you that a design system is not set in stone. You can still come here and manipulate. So currently it's set to regular. We need to change this to medium. Or we can also go semi-bold. Right? So now this is looking more like a subheading. We need to duplicate this. We're going to change the style to, let's see. So we did not even have one smaller than that because we did not go through everything when creating the design system. Right. So we can simply just can create one right now. We're going to detach this, right? So we want something smaller, so 16 pixels. Semi-bold 16 pixels. I'm going to make it regular. Okay, then I'm going to make it a style, so like I've done before. So click, I'm going to name it subheading. Like this is so create style, right? So now this is subheading H1. So you can also use the H1 notation, H1, H2, H3, H4 down to H10 or as much as you want. Just the naming system or naming convention that works best for you that you can explain to your team members, right? So this is why we also have to look at other people's other design systems, like the ones I share, the leading ones, right? To see their naming conventions, how they name things and how they do their things, right? Because it's already working for them. Now I have this ready. I'm just going to right. So I'm just going to make it to the middle. I'm going to adjust this. I'm going to center align it, right? Going to typography, I'm going to align in the center and take it to the middle again. I'm going to check the spacing with this is currently 16 pixels. I'm going to group all of them under Shift A, add them to a frame, and make sure they're all in the middle of the page. All right, so now I'm going to get our input field, right? So if you do not want to stress about going to your design system over and over to copy this, I don't want to go over to start copying all this, right? I can just then click on your asset. As long as it was created as a component, you're going to see it in your assets in your asset part of your layer panel. So now if you go over to your left hand side as your layers panel, where you have files selected, right? You're going to see something called assets. Once I click on assets, you're going to see all the components that were created in this file or all the components that you imported. So because sometimes you might have to import some components and some design system elements, right? Because we are going to be working with other established design systems sometimes, right? Those are the ones that I've created in this file. For the input field, I don't think we do not make it a design system. So I'm going to just do that, right? I'm just going to click on this and make it a component. So I can add a variant. We can also still include your checkbox and your label. I'm just going to get my checkbox and label. Click on. I'm going to get it here and put it in here, right? This one's a small, so I'm just going to, I would detach this because it's not easy. I'm going to make this 12. I'm just going to call this additional text. I'm going to make it regular. And also, it shouldn't be black like that. So remembering hierarchy, we're going to make it a dark gray. Mhm. This works, right? So this is our normal input field. That's default input field. And this is input field with a text, right? So I'm just going to correct this. and just leave it like that. I'm just going to copy this. Control C, right? And I'm going to come here and I'm going to paste it. Control V, going to bring it down. I'm not going to carry it to the middle now. So now because we are respecting our margin of 16. So I want this to be 16 pixels. I'm going to move it down here. So I want this to be 16 pixels here and 16 pixels here. I'm going to move this. Right. Right. So now for this input field, right? Considering we are working with a mobile screen now, and a mobile screen is 375 pixels. So like I said before, in designing, sometimes you have to start calculating. The width of our screen is 375 pixels, right? And we are expecting a margin of 16 pixels at the left and 16 pixels at the right. So what should be our ideal width of our input field? So it should be 375 minus 16 minus 16. That's basically 375 minus 32, right? So you can simply just do that here. If you don't want to use a calculator, I want to extend this. So I'm just going to go to the width 375 minus 16 minus 16, right? So ideally, our input field should be 343 pixels. I'm going to do the same for this. 342, 343. I'm going to set this to fill container. So once I set it to fill container, it's going to adjust the width to fill the width of the container. I'm going to do the same for this. Fill container. Right, I'm going to make this 343. Right, so now that I've adjusted it from the main component, right? So the instance that we dragged here should adjust to. Now, if you see now, if you click on Alt, right? So if you click on Alt, you need to see that it's currently having 343 width and is respecting our margin of 16, 16 at both sides. Okay, right, so I'm just going to make this 8, right? So this is full name, this is email, Then we need a button. We need our button. We need to get our button here. Control C. I'm going to paste it here. Control V. Alright, so usually in designing for desktop or for mobile rather, we usually like our buttons to be extended to touch the margin, right? So I can see if I can change the width of this to 343 to the center, right? So that's the thing about design is that it is repetitive. So if you're always going to be working with an iPhone 13 mini screens for your mobile screens, right? 343 should be a registered number in your head already. After calculating it the first time, you're going to use over and over and over and over again because you're always going to be respecting that 16 pixel margin, right? Unless you want to always be working with your grid open. But sometimes when especially when you're working with colors, it can be distracting and we do not want that, right? So you just switch on your grid when you want to check things, when you're done with a lot of things and you just want to confirm that everything is working well. And if you look at it now, we're going to see that yes, it's respecting the grid system that we created, the button too, right? It's pinpoint. So all right, so this is a simple create an account screen. So actually um I like to connect all elements in my design with auto layout. I like to join all my atoms. I don't like it being um on its own, right? So once I'm done getting my smaller groups, I group all of them together to get the bigger picture because it helps you easily to when you want to adjust or make some corrections in your design. Right, so I'm just going to click on shift this and this, click on shift A, check the spacing between this is 28 and adjust it to 32. Can even adjust it even more to 48, right? So just as long as you're respecting your system. And also still bring this to the middle. I'm going to duplicate this, right? So usually, apart from manually creating your account, as clicking on create account, you can try to create continue with Google, continue with Apple, or you do it. There's always an indication. Yes, yeah. There's always a part, right? Remember, like I said, in design or when you're designing for your users, there will always be a part out, right? So someone might be stuck in this screen. You're asking the person to create an account, right? And the only person thing they're seeing is to add their full name and their email and to create an account. But I might not want to create an account, right? I might already have an account, so I want to sign up instead. So there should always be an option to sign up in a create an account screen. So it gives your users a way out, right? So even if it's not there, there should be a back button. So the back button should be an indication that once I click on this back button, I can set my options. I can decide to now sign up to now log in instead of creating an account or signing up. Right. So under this, I can simply add a small text here that says already have an account. So these are label text, right? These are usually informative. label or captions rather. This 8 is in the middle. So this login now is an action. This is also a button, right? But it's not the primary button on this screen. The primary button on this screen is to create an account because that's what people coming to this screen are there for. Right? But it's also a button. So what we can do here is to make it is to probably bring in the tertiary button. That's this one here, right? And use it. Can reduce the size to 12. And so if you notice, if we do not want this formatting with the G here, we can simply just go to our properties, our typography properties, right? Well, you're not going to see it here because this is not the primary component. This is not the mother component, right? I'm going to copy this, Control C, going to Control V. It's not a text. Yes, I'm just going to click, delete this. I'm going to bring this in here, right? Click on Shift A to group them. Go to my file so I can see my elements. This is my login button. And this is my account. Right? So the design is making a little bit of sense now, right? So you can also still group this to Shift A and make this 16 and just whatever works for us, right? Okay, sometimes in this infuse field itself, it's going to duplicate this. We're going to get our checkbox. All right, so I'm going to click on this, make it 12. Right, so it's going to usually look like this. I'm just going to try to adjust this. Right, so that's the importance of creating a very broad design system, right? So because there's some sizes that we need and we cannot get, so we would usually have to detach from the design style and work with something else, right? So yeah. Now we have successfully done a simple design using the elements that we used we created in our design system rather. Right. So this is currently in the checked state. Right, sorry about that. So it's currently in the checked state. If I select default, it goes to default stage, right? So as easily as that. So that's how your design system helps you. The same thing with your button. If I click on, let's say, state, I want it to be disabled, right? It becomes disabled just like that. Right? Even your typography, if I want to just I want to change this, I want something huge, right? So it's just like that. And your auto layout also helps you because as things are changing and increasing and reducing in size, because they are already grouped, right, with a constraint, with an auto layout, with a layout given to it, right? It's going to respect that layout and resize according to that constraint that you have imposed on it. So I'm going to click on Control Z to do that. Right, so are there any questions or any questions concerning using your design system and navigating Figma and all that? Are there any questions concerning that? All right, sorry about that. I guess there are no questions about any of that, right? Right, sorry about that. My environment is a bit loud. Okay, so that'll be all for today's session. Um, how about for today's session? In our next session, we're just going to. I'm really sorry about Grant. We're going to try. We're going to work on designing a dashboard, right? So we have tried and we have worked on an e-commerce system. We have worked on a website landing page, right? So at this stage of design, because we're in prototyping stage, it's just about trying our hands out, right? We have gotten used to some aspects of Figma. To most aspects of Figma, we've understood the concept of design systems. We have gotten every foundational knowledge that we need to start designing. So I would advise everyone here just go to the inspirational sources I shared in the group, Behance, Dribble, right? So let me share that because we could not really go over it one by one in that class, right? But all right, so this is the resources I dropped before. So just go to Mopin, to Behance, to awards.com, Pinterest, Uplabs, godly.website, people.com, and you're going to see different resources. You're going to see designers like yourselves and what they have been doing, right? So, so it's Dribble with three B's, so triple B's, right? So this is what the interface looks like. I don't know if we have already gone there to look at what it looks like, right? So you can ask what what type of design are you interested in? There's landing page, e-commerce, a dashboard, an LMS, right? A card, just depending on what you want to start working on. So most of us, the design we did for the problems that we ideated and researched on. So now that we are more knowledgeable on this, we can go back and improve it, right? Because at the end of this cohort, you're going to have to create a case study out of it. So also in our next class, we're going to talk about testing. So if you remember our design thinking process, we have gone all the way from empathizing, empathizing to ideating to empathizing, ideate sorry, empathizing, defining, ideating, then prototyping. Right. So prototyping we are still part of that. We are still in that phase of prototyping, right? So then the next phase is testing. So the designs that you have created, the system, the design system you have created, the the UI that you have designed, right? And you have given your developers, you want to give your developers, how do we test them with real users? How do we know that they're actually working? That's what we're going to go through. So the common ways that we have talked about is simply giving this your user interfaces to the users, right? Just give it to them face to face and watch them use it to know if it actually works for them or solves their problem. But we usually not have access to these real users, right? So imagine you are creating an application for the visually impaired, or if someone from Fiverr or Upwork employed you to create something, you might not have access to that group of people, like good access to those group of people to test that things on, right? So that's why we have the internet. So there are some websites, there's some sites that you can use to test your design, you can use to test your information architecture, you can use to test your research. So that's the whole thing about testing, right? So after the testing phase now, we can now confidently say that we have designed this, that we have solved a problem, right? Because the problem has been tested and trusted. Right. So while we are still in this prototyping phase, we can still look around with different resources I dropped, right? So these are different things you can, if I click on, let's say, dashboard, right, so you're going to see different dashboard. You can simply come here and recreate it because design is something that you learn by, it's muscle memory. You learn by doing, right? So because apart from using the boxes, you're using the boxes and the colors and the fonts on Figma, it's something that has to be learned by experience because there's a lot of detail to it, right? And you do not really know it. You don't really know those details unless you have done it before. So like how I talked about the buttons having a hover state, able state, the pressed state, right? So these are interactions that we have been doing unknowingly because it's just something that we have been using our mobile phones. We just click a button, go to the next page, but we don't really see those things in detail, right? So that's why we have to test. We have to keep designing, testing our knowledge and our expertise with Figma, right? So this is our different dashboards. You can simply come here and try to design something, right? So you just simply look at this, right? So this is, remember the concept of atomic design, right? So this is a text, 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 a rectangle, an icon probably. This is a circle, this is an icon, this is a rectangle, right? So it's as easy as that, right? Just simply think of it as atoms merging together to give you a molecule, right? And design will not really be that hard for you as far as UI design is concerned, as far as using Figma is concerned, it should not be hard for you, right? So even this let's say look at this project and this animation here, this element here, right? So how is this thing created? There are different ways to create this. You can go to YouTube to find out how this was done. You can try to experiment yourself using the knowledge of union tools to merge and to mask, right? So all the things that you have to touch. You might not touch them individually, but by the time you are trying out different designs, you find out different aspects of Figma that you were not previously familiar with, right? So same thing here, just the same thing. So yeah, with everything I've taught everyone in this cohort, in this class, I think we should be able to design this, right? So just as simple as sitting yourself down on your laptop and just walking through it little by little, right? So ensuring that the space between this and this is 1624 is respecting your spacing of 8 pixels, right? The same thing here, your colors and all that. So even when replicating designs, you're going to see how visual hierarchy is respected, right? So look at how the dashboard is currently selected, and you can simply see that easily with how the font size of the dashboard is bolder, right? The icons is filled, and there's a tab bar here indicating that this dashboard is selected. So these are three different indicators that the dashboard is currently selected. There are also different ways to do this. So if you look at this button here, there's a gradient here. So have you done this before? Just ask yourself and test it out. Right. So that's all that too. Now next class would talk a little bit about the dashboard anatomy because it's actually a complex design that would have to work on. Everybody using LMS, you're already familiar with the dashboard interface, right? Your LMS interface is a dashboard interface, but it can get more complex than that. So we're going to do talk a little bit about the anatomy, like we talked about the landing page design. Then we go into testing, how to test our designs for usability and all that. Right, so before I end the session, are there any questions? Are there any questions? We are slowly coming to the end of cohort, right? So if there's anything that you're yet to know, you're still confused about, you should be asking questions. You should be, right? Unless I have touched all aspects or that there is nothing that you're confused about, right? Which is a good thing.